Hello, Grand Archive players. Let's answer a rules question. How do you handle triggers that happen simultaneously? Let's say you play a palatial concourse and a hidden enclave. At the beginning of your next recollection phase, do you glimpse first or do you mill first? Fortunately, when it comes to simultaneous triggers, the rules are pretty simple. In the case that multiple triggered abilities controlled by the same player go onto the stack due to the same game event, that player simply chooses what order they go onto the stack. It doesn't matter what order you played these two cards in. In this case, these two triggers both try to go onto the stack at the beginning of the recollection phase, so as the player who controls both, you get to choose if you'd like to mill then glimpse, or glimpse then mill. Now, what if your opponent controlled the hidden enclave? Here we get to the second rule. If multiple triggered abilities controlled by different players go onto the stack at the same time, they enter the stack in turn order starting from the turn player. That means, since it's your turn, your palatial concourse trigger goes onto the stack first, then the opponent's hidden enclave trigger. Note that due to the way the stack works, since your trigger went onto the stack first, it will resolve last. As a result, you will mill first, then glimpse. You do not get to choose the order in this case. So to sum up, we have two simple rules for putting simultaneously triggered abilities on the stack. They enter the stack in turn order, starting with the turn player, and each player chooses the order of their own triggers if they have multiple. Due to this ordering, the non-turn player's triggers will resolve first. One thing to watch out for is sorting out the order of events and making sure they are actually simultaneous. Some events seem like they might be simultaneous but aren't, since they require the resolution of certain events in a particular order. For example, if you controlled an Aegis of Dawn with a Man Exile on the field, and someone activated Pyroclastic Flow, Aegis of Dawn would not trigger to summon an Automaton Drum. The 2 damage from the Pyroclastic Flow is dealt, then the Man Exile's on-death trigger would constitute another 2 damage separately. This would be the same even if there are multiple Man Exiles in play. Another example is the classic scenario of sacrificing an ally with an on-death trigger to a card like Cremation Ritual. You wouldn't get to control the order of these effects on the stack. They will go on the stack in a specific order. One common confusion around timing involves an object with an end phase trigger returning from being suppressed. Returning from being suppressed is indeed a triggered ability, controlled by the player who performed the suppression. For example, this Promising Recruit has a trigger to get a buff counter at the beginning of the end phase. If a Promising Recruit was suppressed, it would be returned to the field at the beginning of the end phase. However, it would not trigger to get a buff counter, since the trigger event of at the beginning of the end phase had already passed. Let's move on to some examples. Question: you control Janye, Dawn's Keep, and a Wandering Glavier with exactly 6 influence. The Wandering Glavier dies. How many cards can you draw? Answer: when Wandering Glavier dies, it has 2 triggered abilities, the one to draw from its own on-death and the one granted to it by Janye. You control both of these triggers, so you can choose which order to put them on the stack and therefore what order they will resolve. If you put the Janye draw on first, then the Glavier draw, both players draw a card. Then you won't draw from the Janye trigger. Alternatively, you can put the Janye draw on the stack second so it resolves first. So you'd be able to draw from both triggers. Question: you activate Vengeful Gust on your opponent's Novice Healer, both with appropriate level and class bonuses, while your opponent's champion is at 2 damage remaining. What happens at the end phase? Answer: Novice Healer returns to the field from being suppressed at the end phase, causing multiple triggered abilities to trigger. If you look at Vengeful Gust carefully, it gives an on-enter ability to the suppressed ally. So, Novice Healer has 2 on-enter abilities, but they are both controlled by your opponent, so they can stack those as they wish. Most likely, they will want to recover 3 before taking the 4 damage. Question: you control an Arma, Gaia's Wings, while your opponent controls Diao Chen, Idle Coursage. What happens when Arima dies? Answer: when Arima dies, there are 2 triggers that are trying to act on it from the graveyard, one controlled by you to put into memory, and one controlled by your opponent to banish it. The order that these triggers would resolve depends on whose turn it is. If you are the turn player, Diao Chen's trigger goes on the stack second and will banish Arima before it can return to memory. The trigger that attempts to return Arima from graveyard to memory will only work if Arima is still in the graveyard when it tries to resolve. Since it is no longer in the expected zone, this trigger will do nothing. On the other hand, if your opponent is a turn player, Arima will return to memory before Diao Chen can banish it from the graveyard. Question: you attack the opponent's champion with Blazing Direwolf with class bonus, sending 2 damage at your opponent's intercepting Swift Recruit. What does Blazing Direwolf deal combat damage to? Answer: Blazing Direwolf and Swift Recruit's intercept both occur at the same time, that is, on attack declaration. They will go on the stack in turn order. You are the turn player, so Blazing Direwolf's attack trigger enters the stack first, and then the intercept trigger, which will resolve first. So when we resolve this stack, the attack gets intercepted, then the switch recruit is dealt 2 damage and dies. However, since the attack was already redirected, Blazing Direwolf is now attacking a unit that no longer exists on the field, and the attack becomes invalid. The opponent's champion will not take combat damage in this phase. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.